All right. Um, uh, Welcome again to our second gathering for reflections from the mission field.
Check this out. Or you want to...
Last week we had a good conversation about uh, the Zoe Ministry program and some of the things that they do that are kind of unique in the field for missions. And this week we have our very own Sam Rogers, who is going to share a bit from his. You know what? I'm going to mute everybody that's not me or Sam. Nothing against y'all. All right. This week we have our very own Sam Rogers, who's going to talk to us about two different mission trips to Cuba. Correct, Sam? Three different mission trips to Cuba. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to share with us about Cuba and the context and the ministry and his experience and how it changed him. So Sam, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to start the timer so that we've got it.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. All right, Fred.
Okay. I want to first off say that I've attended many Zoom programs in the last year or so with the pandemic, but this is the first time I was the program. And I'll tell you, frankly, I'm not really comfortable with this. Number one, I don't know how I'm going to talk, how long I'm going to talk, but Mary Margaret just walked in and she's sitting behind me with a hook. So I'll know when I'm getting off base. And you're going to give me the high sign when I get about halfway through what I think I got to say. What I want to do is I want to talk for, I think, about 30 minutes. And then I want to show you some pictures that were taken of the 2017 trip, which was the last trip that I took with Wayne Wyatt, to show you, to try to put some meat on the bones to show you what it looks like in Cuba. And another thing that I want to do is give you my perspective, mine and Mary Margaret's perspective on Cuba and what it means, what Cuba has come, the Cuban people in that church have come to mean to us as a matter of our faith. So with that, let me begin. How did I become involved as the point person for Trinity's sister church in Fomento, Cuba? Actually, I was volunteered for the job by our erstwhile pastor, John Willis, shortly after he arrived in Tallahassee around 2003. I think he came in the late 90s. I think John got wind of the fact that I was trying to learn how to speak Spanish. Anyhow, he called me one day and he said, Sam, I have signed you and Mary Margaret up to go to Fomento, Cuba with Pat and me for a week to visit our sister church there in Fomento. And while there, I'm going to be preaching both in Fomento and at the Cuban Methodist Conference in Santa Clara, Cuba. And my mind is going like this: does he want me to be a translator? And I think I said something like, John, if you need a translator, I ain't your guy. I'm only a student of Spanish, and I can't carry on a conversation in Spanish, can't carry on one very much in English, let alone translate what they're trying to say. So he responded right back to me and said, so I'll take that as a yes. And that's how I got there. And to set the stage a little bit, let me tell you just a little bit about Fomento, Cuba. Fomento is right slap in the middle of the country, about halfway between Havana and the other halfway between the east or west end of it. It's in the foothills of the Escambray Mountains, and it's a little town with probably no more than 3,000 or 4,000 people, and it's a farming community, and the farmers there raise tobacco and sugarcane, of course. There's a one commercial railroad running right up the center of the town to gather up the crops and take them back to Havana or whatever. Also, a great number of people there work in the sugar mill, which is a back-breaking, stinking job at its best. What it reminds me of, Fomento reminds me of, is a small farming town that we've all been through in South Georgia, for example. Only it's much, much more primitive than that. It goes, if you could set them back into the early 1900s, that's about what it would look like there. No Cubans have cars. The only people that have cars are people that belong to the Communist Party, and they allow some to have cars to get people around there to under a license. The church has been there. The Methodist Church has been there since 1908. That's well over 100 years. And the name of it is Iglesia San Pablo Metodista. As somebody said earlier, I've made 3 trips there. I first went there with John and Pat and Mary Margaret and I in 2003, and then we went back, Mary Margaret and I went back in 2008 to be there for the celebration of their 100th anniversary, their centennial. And then in 2017, Wayne Wyatt and I made the last trip that was made there, and the difference between the time we first went and the time Wayne and I were there the last time was like night and day. The whole tenor of the country has changed since then, I think, for the better. Finally, as I told you, I want to try to explain what it means, what our visits there and our relationships there mean to our own faith. I want you to just think about this for a minute. Imagine for a moment that you live in a country, not the United States, but you live in a country where there's no Bill of Rights regarding the establishment of religion. Indeed, until 1998, when the Pope John Paul went there, religion was prohibited by the Constitution of the country of Cuba. Another thing that you can imagine is that your government grants you the right to participate in religious activities then after 2000, after the Pope had visited only, to participate in religious services only on a limited basis and at your own personal peril. And I'll explain that. Your pastor to speak in church has to have written permission to speak in church. There'll be spies in the church listening to what he has to say. The only information that you will receive is carefully fed to you by government. You don't get any outside news. You're discriminated against for your faith. If you have children who want to go to college and are qualified to go to college, they can't go to college unless the parents are members of the Communist Party. And people that live out in the country like that are not members of the Communist Party. So they tell you what your career is going to be. And now let me get to a few personal experiences to back up what I've just said. Pope John Paul came there in 1998. I think some of us may remember when he came there. He was greeted in the Revolutionary Plaza in downtown Havana by thousands of Cubans yelling and screaming praises to the Pope. And Castro even attended a mass, and after that mass declared that Christmas, for the first time since 1959, would be declared a national holiday. Churches, he went on to say, Fidel went on to say that churches would be allowed to start up again, provided they did not expand beyond the footprint of the original church after the revolution. In other words, when the revolution in 1959 came along, all of the the priests and the pastors of the several different churches there were told to ran out of the country. The government took over all of the buildings of the church and made government buildings out of it. So now they changed it a little bit to say that you can have you can go back to having church, but you have to do it within the footprint of the church, and you cannot expand into new churches. You can't have any more religion than you had prior to the revolution. Personally, I think that was a big mistake, the biggest mistake Fidel Castro ever made in his own self-interest, and I'll tell you why. Let me take you to when John and Pat and Mary Margaret and I first got there. When we arrived on this Russian airplane called an Illusion or something like that, which both of us were nervous about flying in the first place, we were not taken to the gate of the international airport. We were taken off to, our plane taxied over to a building way off to the side. And as we were getting off of the plane, there were military guards there. I mean, they were all over the place with AK-47s, and they herded us into this room. And we sat there for 2 hours while they searched our baggages and did whatever else they were going to do. And they even confiscated some of the medicine that we had brought down with us for our church people there. And our leader said that was okay, that was expected. And that was our first experience there. And it was kind of a little bit unsettling when you saw all those guns around there like that. The government in Cuba, we learned, has control of the education of children. Now, I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. A friend of mine who was a Cuban American said that when a child is in the first grade, the teacher walks into the room and says, "Does anybody want candy?" And they all raise their hands, "Yay, yay." And the teacher says, "Bow your head and pray to God for candy." So they bow their head and pray, and when they look up, there's no candy. And then the teacher says, "Now bow your head and pray to Fidel, to Commandant Fidel Castro." So they bow their head, and when they cut up, there's candy. And that's the point that they make, that God is irrelevant, that Castro is everything. And there are other examples of that. One of the things that I think directly affected John while we were down, John Willis while we're down there, is John had to have permission to present his sermon the first night we were there. And it was getting on toward the time for the sermon to go, and the written permission slip had not arrived. And John said, "To heck with that, I'm going out there and preach. I don't care whether they give me permission or not." Well, everybody started scurrying around worried about that then. And finally, they came up about 15 minutes before he was scheduled to go on with the permission so he could speak. And he did a stem winder too. The second trip that we went down there in 2008 for their 100th anniversary, I spoke earlier of how they spy on you in church. When I got to, when we got to Fomento, a new member of the church latched on to me for some reason. And every chance he would get, he'd get me off by himself, and he would say, "Tell me about free enterprise. Tell me about America. Tell me what's going on." He said, "I've tried to get information from that, but every time I go to the library, they send me to Sancta Spiritus," that's another town there, or they tell me all you need to know about is Marxism and Leninist. And I had already been prompted that we were not to talk politics with them, either our politics or theirs. And I later found out that guy was a planted spy. He had joined the church at the request of the Communist Party locally there. And when we left, he was promoted from a math teacher in high school to be the principal of the high school there. That's what they do to you. That's personal experience. There was another incident that occurred. I don't think it was while we were there, but that we heard that they had some problems with some equipment in the church there, and they went to Havana to get the parts that they needed, and the hardware store there refused to sell them to them because it was a religious institution. That's what those people had to put up with in the time that in the first two times that we were there. Can you just imagine what it would be like for us, who are free to do whatever we want to? Now let's fast forward to the year 2017, roughly 4 years ago, when Wayne and I went down there together. And let me begin by, I'm sure all of us will remember that during the Civil War in America, when Abraham Lincoln said that, and I quote him, "The dogmas of the past are inadequate to the present." He was talking about the South then, but he was prescient in that he must have been talking about Cuba too, because what's going on in Cuba then is not acceptable today. In 2015, when Obama was president, Cuba and the US shared embassies. We opened an embassy in Havana, and they opened an embassy in Washington. Relations were beginning to improve. Things were going on that were really encouraging to everybody. And then after Obama went out of office, Trump came in and canceled everything, and relationships with Cuba went to hell again. And you'll see a picture in a few minutes that's proof of this. On the first night Wayne Wyatt was there, he was the featured preacher at the church. Just before the church session was there, and there were about 150 people in the room, in the sanctuary of that little church. In comes a procession of the choir. Followed by the choir was a flag, was the Christian flag. Followed by the Christian flag was the Cuban national flag. And guess what? The flag bringing up the rear was Old Glory. Had that happened in 2003, somebody would have gone to jail for that. Okay, let's talk about I want to talk to you about the growth of religion from 2003, when we were there the first time, to today. The church in Fomento today has grown from 50 members when we were there in 2003 to 150 members today. There are 50 to 75 children in Sunday school every Sunday there, and they get a meal too. Now, John, you'll be happy to know that not only is Cabaguan the church, the mission church that you helped to establish when you were our pastor down there, but there are 5 residence churches that are connected to Iglesia San Pablo down there. Now, we visited, while Wayne was there, we visited 2 or 3 of them, including the one in Cabaguan. And just as a story there, when we were there in 2003, our pastor of the church there, Pastor Martinez, took us over to Cabaguan, which was a little town very near there, in private automobiles. When we drove into town, we parked way away from where we were going in a parking lot, and we had to walk 2 or 3 blocks to where we were going. And the reason for that was the pastor told us that he didn't trust the drivers of the car because they might report us to the local Communist Party, because they were not allowed to have these little residence churches there. At that time, I think they had probably about 8 or 10 people that were meeting in this little house that belonged to this lady, and now they've got about 75 people who are members of that same little residence church there. Today in Cuba, There are more than 500 Methodist churches throughout the country of Cuba. And there are 65,000 more, there are more than 65,000 members and friends of the Methodist Church. And when you consider that the Catholic Church is there too, and their presence is much bigger than ours, and the Baptists are there, and the Presbyterians are there, and the Church of God is there, and I think several others. Just think about what an impact that faith and religion has had since it was first opened the door slightly to what it is today. Another thing that's happened there that didn't have, that wasn't present when John and I were there the first time, is that almost every Cuban in the country has access to the internet now, and almost all of them have cell phones, and they use them regularly, and they can call the States on them too. Okay, now how am I doing? How am I doing, Nick?
Oh, you're great. You've got about 12 minutes left on a half hour or so.
Okay, well, I think I can wind it up here pretty quick.
Okay.
The question is, what does all of this mean to Mary Margaret and me? Well, let me tell you this. I learned something about my own faith down there. I learned their faith in God is palpable. Everything they do is dedicated to the glory of God. And the church is the center of daily life down there. They don't meet just on Sundays. They have 3 services on Sundays, and they also meet on Wednesday night, and they meet on Thursday, and sometimes they meet on Friday night. And they don't meet for an hour; they meet for hours. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, and another thing that's important to us is we've made some very close friends down there. Davis Colina is a guy a little bit younger than I am. He's a stonemason, and he plays the saxophone in the little band that you'll see in some of these photos there. And he and I really hit it off well together. He spoke a little English, and I spoke a little Spanish, and between the two of us, we were able to communicate pretty well. He is married to a twin. Her name is Mai Day, and her sister's name is Mai Tay. And their mother is the musical director for the church there. Her name is Zoila Garcia Glass. She plays the piano like an accomplished pianist, and she is a fine, grand lady. And on the second trip we made down there, she asked us to sing Amazing Grace to her accompaniment and the band's accompaniment there. And there were about 6 or 7 of us down there, including Larry Benson. Larry's not with us anymore, but the whole group of us got up on the stage down there. And we said, we don't know Spanish. She said, that's all right. Sing it in English 4 times. There's 4 verses. So we sang Amazing Grace 4 times, and she would carry it on. And at the end of it, it broke the house down. I mean, broke the house up. It was a great emotional experience for all of us. In fact, so much to Larry Benson that at his funeral, when Larry died, he insisted that those of us who were still at Trinity and available sang Amazing Grace all four, the first stanza 4 times, and we did. Mary Margaret said here, and we all got up there and sang it at his funeral. He was so impressed with it. One of the things that's amazing to me that impacted my faith so much is, here we sit in America with everything, and here they sit in Cuba, and I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about cultures. They have nothing compared to what we have, and yet their faith is much deeper than the American faith is, if you understand what I'm saying, and that makes sense to me. Mary Margaret and I really consider ourselves, in addition to our longtime membership in Trinity, we consider ourselves to be members of that church down there. In fact, we make a pledge to ourselves every year to send an offering at Christmas time down there. And that offering is used to have a pork dinner, a roast pork dinner for their Christmas day dinner every year. And we do that, and it's important to us to do that. In fact, you might say there's a word that they use in Cuba. The Cuban language word for a country boy is guajiro. I consider myself a guajiro, or an American Cuban, and I'm proud to say that. And let me see what else I had a note to say about here. Okay. What about tomorrow? What's my take on what's going to happen in Cuba tomorrow? Well, as we all have read in the paper just recently, the Castros are finally gone. And the jury's out on how the new government and the new premier, or whatever they call him, is going to be, how he will function. But I do know this, that Cubans have had a taste of freedom. They're allowed to have some limited free enterprise. For example, if you are an appliance, if you know how to repair appliances, you can open a little business and repair appliances and make a little money for that. That's permitted. You're permitted by the government now to have a restaurant, what they call home restaurants, to serve a limited number of meals in homes, and they make a little money on that. And I don't think the Cubans are going to give that up in the future. In my opinion, there's a new revolution that's underway, and it's fueled by a younger generation. What few friends Cuba had in the world, like Venezuela, are long gone, and the Russians are long gone. They're on their own. My biggest fear for the future of a free Cuba, frankly, is the Cuban Americans who left Cuba, understandably, after the revolution. In Miami, they're going to be demanding reparations for the property that they lost, or rather gave up, when the Cubans left Cuba. And the Cubans that are down there now are going to have none of it. And that's going to create problems if Cuba becomes free again. And that's just my opinion of it. And I just want to end what I have to say here by reading you a poem from the great patriot of Cuba, Jose Marti, who was a poet and lived in the early 1900s. And this is a poem that he wrote, and I think it sums up pretty much the nature of the people. He says, and I quote, "I am an honest man from where the palm trees grow. I come from everywhere and go everywhere. I am art among the arts. In the mountains, I am a mountain. I have seen the wounded eagle fly, the pain that hurts me, the son of an enslaved people." And I think that, that those pretty much sum up the sentiments of the good people who live in Cuba today and have made the best of a bad deal below these past 70 years. And you want to go to those pictures now? Nick? Pictures? Click, click, photos. Oh, okay. Well, give me a minute. There you go. Can everybody hear me now? Okay. Here's my good friend, Davis Molina, and his wife, Maya Day. Their first son, was named Samuel after me. You don't think that got my attention? Flip on. He's also the saxophone player. And incidentally, when their saxophone broke down and they had to get a new one, Trinity sent money down there for them to buy a new saxophone, not a new one, but an old remade one that they use today. This next picture is their youth putting on during services, doing a dance and singing, and it's a beautiful thing. Go ahead, next. There's Wayne Davis. I don't remember his name, but those are the kind of people that they are. Go ahead, Nick. There's the sanctuary, and there's Wayne right up there in the front. You can see all the people in there waiting there to hear his sermon that first night. And I got something else to tell you about that too, but click it over. Fidel, it says, until victory, to victory always is what that says in Spanish. Well, he's gone now. Next. This photo was taken over in Sancta Spiritus at the district meeting, and the bishop, the Cuban bishop, Bishop Piera, showed up at that meeting, and they get a little bit more emotional when they get to praying and carrying on down there. In fact, some of them fall out on the ground, and I got a little uneasy about that, but that's the way they do it, and I don't fault it. Go ahead. That's Samuel, my namesake. Good-looking kid too, just like his namesake. Go ahead. And there's a local taxi cab. Believe me, that's the way they get around down there. You've seen that before, John. Go ahead. And this is part of their youth. Their youth usually meet there every night. They used to have a study hall there for their kids to study at night. Go ahead. Next. This old guy in Cuba, this old man is called a viejo. And he reminds me of that book written by Hemingway called The Old Man and the Sea. And that's El Viejo y el Mar. But he's a character too that's very much involved in the church. Go ahead. I just wanted to see him. There's another form of transportation around there on their super highways. Go ahead. And those are two sisters that are members of the church. And this is taken in the church courtyard. Go ahead. Oh, this is a funny one you got to see. Wayne and the pastor were baptizing. Wayne helped with the baptizing of 8 of the members. And they got in this child's swimming pool to do the baptizing. And they had a lady who was rather hefty, and Wayne lost his balance and fell in the pool with her during the ceremony. I just thought I'd throw that in there for the fun of it. Go ahead. And that's me and the dog. That's the house dog down there. Go ahead. And this is Wayne and the pastor and me in the courtyard. Go ahead. And they asked me to say a few words that night, and I did so in halting Spanish. And if you'll note, the outfit I had on is called a Cuban guayabera. It's a shirt that's used, that's like you, when you wear one of those, you a dressed up guy. And they gave me that night to wear to show that I was a Cuban. But go ahead. And this is one of Davis's sons who plays the snare drums, the drum down there in the band. Go ahead. And these 4 ladies are the matrons of the church, and they are highly respected, and they have kept that church together even after the revolution. They have stayed, and they would meet privately in what they call their cells after the revolution, when it wasn't, they kept the church together all those years. And that lady right there is the music director, who is the mother of the twins I was telling you about, and she plays a beautiful piano. And these ladies are highly respected. They were recognizing them that night for all of the work they had done for the church. Go ahead. And this is Wayne. I'll tell you about Wayne. He is one more talented guy. That guitar that he's playing, he borrowed and then restrung it to his way of thinking. He started playing that guitar and singing, believe it or not, in Spanish. He had the Spanish language before him, "How Great Thou Art." And when he went through it the first time, and then in English, he said, "Everybody join me." And everybody in the room joined him in singing, "How Great Thou Art." They knew the song, the hymn, rather. And it was really, to me, an emotional time. And it gave me new respect for Wayne and his talents that we are so fortunate to have. Is that it, Nick? Yep, that's it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we've got some time for questions.
We do. We've got time for questions.
Comments.
I trust y'all. I'm not going to moderate. You can unmute yourselves and ask questions. Everybody in here. I trust this crew. Y'all please ask Sam.
Well, they're all muted.
Well, yeah, I muted them. They can do that.
Can they unmute themselves?
They may.
Sam, when was that trip?
The trip, the last one,
Yes.
it was in February of 2017, shortly after Wayne came here.
Sam, why do I vaguely remember that somebody from the Flamenco Church visited Trinity a few years ago?
Yeah. Since I've been, Doc, since I've been the coordinator with the Cuban church down there, I think we've had at least 2 of their pastors come up here and spend a week with us. In fact, both of them have spoken to the Trinity. One needed a translator, but the other one didn't. And I'm going to recommend to Wayne and the powers that be in Trinity that we either set up a meeting, set up a visit, a pastoral visit up here from their current pastor, or that we send a delegation down there to keep that relationship going, because they need us.
Sam, has there been any improvement in terms of being able to get things down there to the people, like the medicines that we tried to send?
Well, when the Trump administration shut down relations with them and canceled and terminated all of that, we couldn't travel down there anymore. In fact, we couldn't even send money down there through Western Union because they shut down the Western Union office. And fortunately, a gentleman who lives on the third floor in Westminster with me is a Puerto Rican, and he knew how to send money to Cuba direct. And I was able to get some money down there to him to help him with that saxophone several weeks ago, or several months ago, I guess. But we have right now, I think we're all dead in the water where they're concerned, unless the Biden administration takes the first move to open up relations again.
Sam, you mentioned the relationship of the Cuban community in the Miami area. Do they relate to the folks that are still on the island, or how is that? Are they this group that's in the States, are they pretty much a separate group from the people that are on the island, or how do they interact or relate to each other?
They had, most of them have families still in Cuba. They have made arrangements that they send money down to their family members in Cuba. But the Cubans that are in Miami, particularly the ones that are in Miami, have nothing but hostility toward the government down there. In fact, friends of mine, a close friend of mine who lives in Miami, did not fault me for going to Cuba, but he said he would never set foot in Cuba as long as the Castros were down there again, but that he would wish the Cuban people well. But I really believe that I really do believe that there's going to be an effort if we start recognizing them again for the Cubans that lost property down there, particularly those who lost property, to try to get reparations for it.
Sam, a friend of mine told about his mom and dad going back to Cuba to see family. I guess it's been a couple of years now, at least, maybe 6 years since, but would have to have been before Trump. And she went to the fabric store, bought yardage, and gathered it as tightly as she could. He said she looked like a barrel walking onto the plane, because she just put all the gathers she could so that this big skirt. And then in the hem of the skirt, they sewed spools of thread.
Yeah.
So that she could take the fabric. She couldn't take fabric, but she could take clothes as long as she was wearing them.
As long as she was wearing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Trinity in the past, Amy, has taken money down there. I used to take $10,000 or $15,000 stuffed into my coat pocket down there that came from several churches in the area that supported other churches down there. That's the way we used to sneak money in there. And Trinity in the past, when we would have a pastor that would come to Tallahassee, we would send him back with at least 2 or 3 suitcases full of medicines that they don't have that they need badly down.
and another friend went, and she said she wore her oldest, grubbiest clothes back on the plane. She looked like a real down and out person, because she'd left all her good clothes. She wore them once. You had to wear them before you could leave them. And she left all her good stuff in Cuba and came home in rags.
We've done that too. Mary Margaret just reminded me, we have gone down there. I've gone down there with maybe 3 or 4 pair of shoes and come back with 1 pair. And it was appreciated. And they're very proud people. They want to do their own. They're honest to a fault as well, to the people that I know down there.
Emma, remember you correctly that the bishop of the Florida Conference was at one time also the Bishop of Cuba.
That's correct. You're exactly right. In fact, Cuba used to be part of the Florida Conference, Dot.
Yep.
That was before the revolution.
Yep, we can name several people.
Now Mary Margaret says now they've got the Cuba has its own Methodist conference down there now, and the bishop is a fellow by the name of Piera, who drives around the countryside and expensive Mercedes automobiles now with a retinue of people following him. Just
Buster was the bishop, wasn't he? Yeah.
anybody else? Nick? That gun, we got out ahead, didn't we?
Got a little ahead. I think it was the bishop from Cuba came to our annual conference meeting. It was the year we were at Disney, at the Disney Resort. So what was that? 17, maybe 16. somewhere in there, and had some church. He did everything in Spanish.
Yeah,
They had a translator trying to keep up,
yeah,
and he waded out into the middle of the body. We're all in this big room at the resort. This giant ballroom, and he wades out in the middle of the crowd. And Sam, he started slaying folks. He started putting them down.
you did that when Pat and John were down there too, and Pat got a little nervous about that. When he would blow in the microphone and they'd fall out on the sides. He is a politician too, a big one, a good one.
Well, we have at least two pastors that I can name who are here in Florida. They're American pastors who spent time as children with their parents in Cuba.
Yeah.
Rankin and Schaefer, Tom Schaefer.
Yeah.
Both of them are fluent. Larry and Tom are both fluent in Spanish because they grew up there.
Yeah.
Their dads were very influential in the church back when, before Castro.
Cuba to me is a land of mystery. It really is. The people there. Cuba was one of the slave states back when slavery was legal, and after the Spanish-American War, when Teddy Roosevelt rode up the hill, the United States Senate passed a bill called the Platt Amendment. And the effect of the Platt Amendment was, and this was in the 1920s or somewhere back in there, that said that the Senate Platt, it was after a guy named Senator Platt. And what it said was that the president of Cuba, or the premier, whatever they called him, when they wanted to pass a law, he had to come to the Washington and sit down with the group of senators and get their approval, and then take it back to Cuba to get it passed. That we exercised great control over them, really until Castro came along. Certainly, Fulgencio Batista was a puppet of the United States, corrupt as he was.
They thought Castro was going to be. You believe that one?
Since we have time, just a little point of history. Our connection with Cuba and the very beginning of the sister church thing started in a lay academy class.
Oh,
And we had Larry Rankin come and talk to us, and Bishop Knox, and David Horton was the pastor then. So this goes back a long, long time.
yeah. Well, the relationship with the Methodist Church in Florida and Cuba does go back to the turn of the century.
Right.
Sure does.
Cool note. That's a cool note.
Am I on or not?
Yeah.
You are.
Well,
And then John came
Hello?
and he went down there.
You're on.
Okay. Two things. Two things. Our former district superintendent, Tony Fernandez, was from Cuba, was a pastor there, and served time in one of Castro's jails before he was released and came to the United States.
And you can't go back.
And he can't go back. But also, want to let you know that somehow I got the idea this was supposed to be about the impact that the mission trip had made upon you. And I want you to know it made such an impact on me that we decided to get the national dog of Cuba, the Havanese.
yeah.
And when when a lot of the people left, when Castro came in, so did the Havanese. And so they came to America, and all the ones here are descendant from the ones that were there when Castro came in.
Now, of course, you need to tell him you're joking.
Oh,
You didn't get it because he
Yeah.
didn't get the dog because of being in Cuba. That just happened.
well, what can I
A
say?
good story. And Sam, I think the guy that you couldn't remember his name, I think that was Eddie.
Yeah, you're right. It sure was. It is. Was Eddie.
That's who Bill Fritchman stayed with.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
he found out he gave Bill this room with a bed, and in the middle of the night, Bill got up to go and get a drink of water and found Eddie was sleeping on the kitchen floor because
Yeah.
he'd given Bill his bed.
Mhm.
Well, we stayed with a family. Mary Margaret and I stayed with a family down there. Their last name was Rodriguez, and they have since immigrated under a Cuban national lottery to the United States. Their whole family has, and they live in Houston now. And they're still good friends of ours. In fact, their son, a guy by the name of Papo, and his wife Isabel are living in Houston, and they came through Tallahassee a couple of 3 years ago and spent a weekend with us on their way to Miami. And incidentally, I forgot to mention that their daughter, one of their Papo and Isabel's daughter, is named Ruth Maria after Mary Margaret, too. And you know, that just shows you the connection and the feeling that we have for those friends of ours down there. The living facilities that we stayed in the house down there with the Rodriguez was a concrete block, square, 2-story, Russian-built apartment building with 4 apartments upstairs and 4 downstairs. They were upstairs, and they had 2 bedrooms, a living room, a sort of a kitchenette, a deal, and a kitchen, but the kitchen had no utilities in it, no appliances in it. They cooked some of the best meals we ever had on a charcoal grill out on the porch on the back. If you wanted to take a bath, you had water hours at any time between 6 at night and 6 in the morning. There was no water, and the water was also cut off in the afternoons. So if you take a bath in the morning, you had to go in there, and there was a shower head with water coming out of it, and you got up under that. And most of the time it was cold to take your bath, and then in the shower, the water went into a big 55-gallon drum, which was then carted off for what. They used the water, yeah.
Flush the toilet the rest of the day.
That's what they used. They used the water in the shower to flush the toilet. And when you went to the bathroom, they had a lot of toilet paper in there, and you were told not to flush the toilet paper down the commode. You had to put it in a little separate trash can. It was really Spartan living, but it was a good visit, and one that has endeared Mary Margaret and myself to those people eternally.
I think we can leave it there.
Sam?
Huh? Yeah, Pat.
I was just gonna say that while we were there with Sam and Mary Margaret, that is true about the housing. And they were so bare in the living room. We stayed with the pastor and his family, and his house was a little bit better than what Mary Margaret and Sam's, but not much. And their living room had 2, as I remember, 2 plastic chairs like you would buy at Walmart to put outside on your patio. and maybe one other bench. And that was their living room furniture, no carpets, bare cement floors. And one night we all went to a Bible study. We were all assigned to different houses. And the one that I went to, there was a huge crowd of people, and it was in one big room, where kind of a room with a kitchen off of it. The only light they had in that house was a light cord hanging from the ceiling with a bare bulb on it. I mean, it was just very, but like Sam said, they were so happy and so warm and welcoming. It was just amazing.
And we were a number of different places in Cuba, and the only place ever we saw air conditioning was in the bishop's office.
Absolutely.
Oh, that doctor's
One last, Mary Margaret just put a book on in front of me that if you're interested in Cuba and the history of Cuba, particularly since in the 20th century, the book is entitled Bacardi and the Long Fight for Cuba. It's written by Tom Gelton, Gjelten, and it's a well-written book. This guy has won some literary prizes. He's an NPR guy, yeah. And the book is really well written. It will give you good insight into the saga of Cuba down through the years. Okay, Nick.
All right, I think so. Sam, thank you so much.
My
for being
pleasure.
with us and
you.
sharing tonight.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Enjoyed it.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.